Okay, so victims of human trafficking health concerns, PowerPoint. Um, Description of the population. Victims can range from different ages, races, gender in different communities. Their economic status can vary and have different levels of education. But there are certain things that can put people at a higher risk of becoming trafficked. These include things like homelessness, runaway youth, foreign nationals, people who have been victim to violence before in their past or their childhood, victims of previous sexual abuse or discrimination. So for the size of the populations, I couldn't really find anything very accurate on Ogden, Utah, which is kind of the area I live in. Um, and there were no 2020 statistics yet that I could find, but in 2019, 90 cases in Utah were reported, and there were 207 contacts that occurred. And then nationally, 14,500 to 17,500 are trafficked into our nation every year. 40.3 million victims of human trafficking worldwide was reported, and that's for 2020. So Utah's just kind of a small percentage of that amount, and I think that's due to the fact of the community we have. The human trafficking hotline works closely with organizations, law enforcement, and everything to help prevent this, and they are in contact with each other, and I think that helps overall with the sharing of information to help prevent the trafficking. Things that are social determinants of health that are creating barriers for these victims would be things like social support, lack of it. They might not have families that support them or good friendships or leaders in their life that support them. They might not have proper education, so therefore get pulled into things easier. Housing instability, things like homelessness, and poor access to health care. If they do get involved, they're not as easily caught or noticed by healthcare providers because they don't have as good as access as normal people do. They're not normal, but people who aren't victims. So reasons for the lack of the social support, maybe because they were taken at a young age, or they just never had a close relationship with their family anyways, which made it easier for them to be trafficked because lack of that social support. And then education not being readily available, like I mentioned earlier. You just can fall into things easier, I believe, with that lack of education. So also like runaways, they're looking for ways to make money, I feel like, as well. They could be easily talked into things. Homeless people too. And although most victims at some point do have access to health care, um, a lot of times it goes unnoticed, or the people feel like they were judged when they were there and couldn't open up or talk about their situation. Specific concerns for this population, a lot of them suffer from depression, anxiety, guilt and shame, post-traumatic stress disorder. They can develop eating disorders like anorexia or bulimic disorder or binge eating, and will probably and may develop substance abuse of drugs or alcohol. And they're all often a victim of sexual and physical abuse, workforce human trafficking victims that are like used as labor. What's the word? Labor trafficked people that are put to work may experience physical fatigue, not get enough rest, not get enough food, proper nutrition, and signs you could maybe see in someone who's being abused, broken bones, bruises, burns, um, just disheveled looks, things like that. So when I looked into root causes, I found this kind of interesting. A lot of people would say that things like poverty, like I talked about earlier, low education, immigration policy, the poor family dynamic, the lack of social support, or just being an immigrant could cause people to become trafficked easier. But the root cause is not those things. The root cause is the traffickers, the people who are willing to profit and make money off of trafficking actual humans. Uh, Richmond says human trafficking is not a naturally occurring phenomenon, it is a choice. And they believe that traffickers can be stopped. They know how to stop them, but proper education needs to be put out into communities, into places like healthcare, um, shelters, just common knowledge so people are aware of it and can look out for others, which I think has been happening lately and has been quite the thing on social media lately. So it's good to know that people are becoming more aware of this so that more traffickers can be stopped. I remember when I picked this subject in last semester, spring semester, it was when I was just kind of realizing human trafficking was like such a real thing, and um, so many people were being trafficked. I didn't realize it was such a big deal until I started writing my paper last semester. So I think just education and knowledge about it is very powerful in treating that root cause. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I kind of base this off of just my knowledge, basic knowledge, thinking of the situation, because there was not a lot of information on this when researching. But if you think of someone who is taken away or not with anyone that loves them, they're honestly just trying to survive, meet their basic needs, food, water, shelter. Um, and if you can't meet those needs, you're not really going to go higher on the pyramid or the hierarchy. Excuse me. So things like feeling safe when you're controlled by someone, manipulated by someone, you're probably not going to feel safe in your environment. You're probably not going to feel loved and belonging to anyone unless you develop some friendships and you already have your basic physiological needs met. And self-actualization and esteem are way high on the tier, so I feel like that would be really hard for them to get to if they aren't getting their basic needs met. With that in mind, I feel like minimal function would be seen, and because their needs aren't being met at the base level. Um, Likely health outcomes for these people without their needs being met, things aren't looking very good. They can get injuries from labor, they're getting sexually assaulted, they can contract STIs, different health problems left untreated because they're not getting proper health care, or they're just neglected and that fact don't have the freedom to go and get the health care they need. Malnutrition, whether it be from the people who are trafficking them, not providing it for them, or them developing eating disorders, excessive drug use that can become problems for many reasons, maybe trying to numb the pain, maybe they are drugged, all of the above post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, all the emotional aspect of things um, that can lead to things like self-harm, and it's not a good mental space to be in for someone. Communicable diseases or infections, whether it's a labor or sex trafficked victim, their communicable diseases are easily spread because of the amount of people they're around, crowded areas, dirty environments, the poor access to healthcare that I've mentioned multiple times, and just poor working conditions. Sex trafficking victims, especially, can be exposed to HIV, AIDS, and other STIs that can occur. And because of overcrowding and the amount of people they're around and the countries they may be in, tuberculosis, hepatitis, measles, and pertussis can be easily transmitted because they're in such close contact with others. Non-communicable diseases or infections. So the World Health Organization stated that non-communicable diseases kill 41 million people each year, which is about 71% of all deaths around the world. Things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, respiratory diseases, and diabetes. We see these all the time. These things can happen for different reasons, whether it's your environment, your behavior, just your genetics, your body. Things that can increase your chances if you do have, let's say, a genetic thing, or your environment's bad, or your diet's bad. Poor diet, exposure to tobacco and smoke products, abuse of drugs and alcohol, and poverty. All of those things. So they're at risk for a lot. They are a very vulnerable population. It's kind of scary to think about how vulnerable they are. It's kind of sad. It is sad. So as far as self-care and self-harm go, obviously survivors of human trafficking have been shown to benefit from self-care. I think, like all of us, we all do better when we take care of ourselves. The most thing I could find was from 2014. It was kind of hard to find anything, but I did find an article of survivors who were in India, I want to say, and we're helping other victims. And by practicing self-care things like reflecting on oneself, being creative, practicing autonomy, moving their body, being open in their relationships, it really helped them to face less trauma when they are around these people who are also victims. Another study done on adult victims who ended up actually seeking out mental health care, 33% of those victims had participated in self-harm previous to their care, and then during care of the ones who seeked it out, 25% of them participated in self-harm. So it is a real thing. They're obviously dealing with depression and anxiety, which can lead to self-harm and suicidal ideation. So I just think it would be good, like if you work in the ER, you have a job where you come in contact with these populations, to really educate yourself and know what to look for, behaviors to notice, so that you can help these people and maybe be able to stop a trafficker or save a life. They are definitely at risk for harm. The traffickers that get these victims, they control and manipulate them. They use things like both physical and sexual abuse. They threaten them. They might threaten things like their family or friends or their own life, and threaten them with financial burdens, like they won't get paid, or they won't have money, or they'll be on their own or abandoned. And these victims are already feeling things like guilt and shame. They feel too scared to leave their perpetrators, just due to the fear of harm to themselves or their families. And they might even have emotional attachment to their perpetrator at this point. And they're just fearful of the unknown, fearful of further abuse, what would happen if they left. And here's my references. You can look at those. And it wouldn't let me do a hanging indent. So that's all.